Welcome in to the Betting the Pitch Podcast Network, NFL edition. I'm your host, real_G Warner on Twitter, Instagram, and Patreon. And welcome to, well, I guess he's always here, but this is my NFL co-host, Andrew Schnicker, A_SCHNITKER on Twitter. And this is the week 4 episode. We're going to do a 6-pack again because that had so much fanfare last weekend. And we won't have to go through 16 games in such a short period of time. So we're going to go the mainstream, like Thursday night football. We have a London game this weekend, Sunday night and Monday night, plus 2 of our own selections on who we want to talk about. Schnicker, how was your week 3? And what are you thinking about for week 4?
Week 3 was actually pretty good. Unfortunately, not in the best bet category, but overall, week 3 was great.
Yeah, 0-2 in the best bets for us. But, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave a 5-star review. Despite the 0-2, now that brings our podcast record to 3-3 on the season. Couldn't follow up a 2-0, unfortunately, but we will rise like a phoenix out of our own ashes. And if you're not a member of my Patreon, check that out. Patreon.com/thereal_G Warner. But let's get into it. So we're going to start with Thursday Night Football. Again, we're going to be really more so looking forward to next week rather than recapping last. But of course, for each of these games that come up, there's probably something to talk about what happened last week. And we'll start with Detroit at Green Bay on Thursday night. And Detroit, they opened as a 1.5-point underdog, now have climbed to 1.5-point favorites at BetOnline. They are currently a 46 total, down from 46.5 at open. All these lines courtesy of BetOnline. Check the description below for promo codes if you're not a member there just yet. So, Shinny, what do you think about the Lions being favored on the road? Of course, they finished last season very well. And I think they also played a game that mattered at the end of last season and kept the Packers out of the playoffs, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
So there's some history there between these two teams.
Oh, yeah, of course. And these are one of the two teams. And actually, let me just go back real quick. 3-3, this is such a minuscule sample size we're dealing with right now, and it's a very long season. So Griffin, if you're feeling down in the dumps, it's okay. We're going to right this ship.
I'm not. I'm 2-1, so I'm doing okay.
That's fair. That's true. Two teams that had a lot of diverse opinions in the offseason. And I don't want to talk too. We're now into week 4, so we're actually starting to get a really good data set for where these teams are in 2023. Most people were pretty low on Jordan Love, and a lot of people were very high on what the Lions were capable of doing after that win at Lambeau Field at the end of last year, and also starting the season with a win over Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs in a primetime audience spot. It's gonna boost everything. What I've seen so far is not the Lions offense that I saw from a year ago. Ben Johnson is their offensive coordinator. I really, really like him. Smart guy, a young up-and-comer type guy. I've not seen the same sort of flash, even though I love the skill set personnel that they have. They beat the Falcons 20-6 in a pretty ho-hum type game where it may have more to do with what the Falcons were putting out there versus what the Lions were able to do. Where do they have success on Thursday night on the road at Green Bay? We got to keep Jared Goff clean. You got to watch that injury report for the Packers. There were a lot of injuries last week on the offensive line. Jair Alexander, their best cornerback, was out, missing that game. Also some other injuries on the defensive side of the ball. I think that the Packers defense doesn't get enough credit. And I think if you can put some pressure on Goff on the road, outdoors, there's still a knock there. So that's where the Packers find success, I think. And conversely, alternatively to that, you got to keep Jared Goff clean.
Okay, so that's the Lions side of this. Looks like 69 degrees, nice on Thursday night. So not a huge concern for weather in Green Bay, as this would potentially be in December or in January, or who knows with global warming. But Detroit do have a pretty quick turnaround from that win over Atlanta. Green Bay on the other side were down 17-0 at halftime and ended up winning 18-17 off of thankfully to a missed field goal from the New Orleans Saints on the road. Crowd went nuts. That was cool. But a tale of two cities, tale of two halves, to say the least. And I've got plenty of questions about Jordan Love. Got plenty of questions about Jared Goff as well. He's certainly gotten paid a lot more than Jordan Love has so far in his career. And I thought last year, Detroit, were pretty much offense only. We're really good over team. Their defense, I think, maybe made a statement with how well they played against Atlanta. They certainly did well reaching back to that opener against the Chiefs, but ultimately that was against a team without Travis Kelce in their first game of the season with a lot of their offensive weapons out the door. So I'm still a little bit curious about the Detroit Lions in their defense right now. Green Bay on the other side, we know they're going to try to run the ball as much as possible to mix success, really. That to me is the most important thing about that matchup. I do lean to Green Bay getting that 1.5, but I think my biggest question is, can Detroit stop Green Bay's rushing attack, considering how bad and porous their defense was last season to where it is now? So what do you think? Do we expect a good yard per play rushing offense from the Packers at home against Detroit on Thursday night?
Well, I mean, it depends on, do they want to just load the box and try to eliminate the run and make Jordan Love win the game? Obviously, in the fourth quarter against the Saints, he was able to do that. That pushed him back up into like the mediocre status of quarterback stats for so far in 2023.
Okay.
So I would assume that they will load the box. Aaron Jones also did not play. If I'm looking at practice reports, and they're just doing walkthroughs at the early portion of this week, even though they're a day away from the game. Aaron Jones was a limited participant. It'd be great to have him back, but again, on a short week, that's going to be tough. I would say that they should have success running the ball. They should be able to run the ball. And Jordan Love, if he does see those stacked boxes, I have faith in Matt LaFleur to be able to put him in the right spots to identify that and for him to see some success.
Well, that makes me like the Packers. Moving to Sunday, we have an 8:30 Central Time kickoff, 9:30 Eastern. The Atlanta Falcons visiting London, as will be the Jacksonville Jaguars, who are apparently the most successful London franchise in all of the NFL history. They're playing at Wembley Stadium in London, where there's usually a bunch of different football matches there. They're called matches over in that area of the world. Currently, the Jags are a -3. They're a 3-point favorite with all the juice right now, potentially climbing to 3.5 before this kicks off. I don't think that'll happen, but we'll see. Total has dropped from 45.5 to 43.5. And I did not remember that this was in London, unfortunately, pulling a Bill Simmons, but I'm very, very curious about why Jacksonville, from how little they've shown so far, coming off a loss to Houston. Yes, some good London history, but it seems very odd to me that they're a 3-point favorite here.
Yeah, I think the bright spot for Jacksonville was that week one where you watched Trevor Lawrence and Calvin Ridley have some sort of connection against the Colts, though. It's the Colts. And this is when we're starting to look at these games and, oh, wow, they're not as impressive results as we once thought. You know, the Packers coming out in week one and blowing away the Chicago Bears doesn't mean as much now as it did in that first week. Similarly, Jacksonville just laid a dud and let CJ Stroud tear him up in the game against the Texans. I have huge concerns about the Jacksonville offensive line. I have some big concerns about what their defense is able to do. The other side of that, though, is what Atlanta offense are we going to see? Like, my optimism for the Falcons was based a lot on the skill players that they had and opening up the playbook a little bit more, where Desmond Ridder wouldn't be, you know, this world beater, but he would have the weapons to his right and left that he could distribute the ball to. And right now it feels like Arthur Smith is terrified to let Desmond Ridder make a mistake. That's the way that they've been playing. That's what we've been seeing. Bijan Robinson had his worst game in his very, short career, but it was because all they were doing was running the ball. It was so predictable that Detroit didn't really have to prepare for anything else. So I like Atlanta's defense a little bit more this year. I think that their pass defense has been borderline exceptional in the first 3 weeks. But this all rests on if the Falcons are going to actually let Desmond Ridder do something and test out this Jacksonville defense that has not shown to be able to stop anything yet.
Well, so I was pretty impressed on the other side of that with Jacksonville and their defense against Kansas City in week 2. Yeah. That was a game that would not have been close if that defense hadn't put up at least some sort of performance in stopping Patrick Mahomes. It eventually was not enough, did not cover. Boo-hoo, I'll cry myself to sleep. But ultimately, I feel like Jacksonville, they do have a quarterback I trust a lot more than Atlanta's, especially if you're concerned that the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons is worried himself about his quarterback. They've got a lot tethered to the Desmond Ridder wagon. But if you look a little bit more closely at Atlanta so far this season, they beat a really bad Panthers team. Then they also really came back at the end of a game to beat the Packers, and then really didn't show up and got beaten pretty badly, soundly, against the Detroit Lions on the road last weekend. So there's some concerns there for me, but I think the biggest ones are Jacksonville being a huge favorite to got a ton of people in Survivor contest, losing at home the Houston Texans, which was kind of shocking. There was a kickoff return touchdown, I think, of some sort in there that can certainly cause some problems as well. But my biggest interest is really in seeing if Jacksonville, just because they're so used to playing in London every season, if that it's not worth 3 points to me. It can't be. So there's a lot of space there for the Falcons go and lose by a last second field goal and cover the spread. I don't know that I've had a ton of success in London in my past, but we also might get 3.5 here, which I feel like anything across the pond above a field goal is too much in my humble opinion. We'll move now to Sunday Night Football, then we'll do Monday night, and then we'll go with our draft picks. I'll lead off, and then Schnigger, you can pick the last game that we talk about. But we'll go directly to fly, I guess, across the pond again. We've already crossed it, went to London. Now we're back in the Meadowlands for Kansas City visiting New York Jets, which I'm sure was a much bigger game just a few weeks ago. We got the Chiefs, who opened a 7-point favorite, have climbed to -9.5 after a pretty dominant performance where I think Patrick Mahomes only played for 2 quarters this weekend, whereas the Jets... I love
that teaser protection right there.
Yeah, a lot of teaser protection. And then you can explain that in a second. The total has dropped from 45 to 42. I would call that the Zach Wilson effect. I did bet the Jets this weekend, and that was a horrible way to lose after finally getting back into it and having a push potential, and then losing on a safety was brutal. After he rushed for a first down, I thought, okay, we've avoided all the bad things that could happen. Just kidding. Here we go. Anyway, so getting in this game, the Chiefs were dominant. They should win this game, it seems. Probably not the most appetizing of games to talk about, but the Jets are going to have to go into KC, or they're hosting Kansas City here, but they're going to have to play great defense again and try to keep this as low scoring as possible.
Yeah, I mean, we can look at the strength on strength of this game with the Chiefs offense versus the Jets defense, or we can look on the other side, which I think is probably the more valuable side, because we know what we're going to see there from we're going to see a Jets defense that's very good, and obviously we know what KC's offense is. So let's look at the other side of the ball. What have you thought of Zach Wilson in 2.5 games so far in his redemption tour as the starting quarterback?
I think he should focus on hanging out with his mom's friends is really what I'm thinking. My concern, especially after betting him and watching, for some reason that was a local game on CBS this weekend. So I got to see every play in a very hungover state as well, which was very disappointing in a lot of different directions for me. But watching him definitely made it feel like the Razors were even deeper in my head than I thought they were when I started. He had one really redeeming drive, and I was like, oh my God, here we go. But seeing a guy scream so loud, boo, that his dentures fell out was pretty interesting in the crowd. I was like, did I see what I think I just saw? And then they cut back to it on CBS. There's a good running game for the Jets, but if you have no respect for a passing game, then it's going to run out eventually. And eventually the Pats, who were down, I think 3 corners, decided that they were just going to say, okay, throw it on us. And it worked for 1 touchdown, but there were so many other problems in that game that I just don't think the Jets defense is good enough to really keep them in any game unless they're putting points on the board themselves, which I think that's a pretty big long shot if you're ever going to take a defensive touchdown in that sort of way. So, I mean, the Kansas City defense, honestly, with Chris Jones is way different than it is without him. I don't see a lot of ways for the Jets to move the ball. And unfortunately, when you don't move the ball, then you are going to try trick plays, or you're going to have really short fields against you. And Patrick Mahomes is too good in that scenario.
So yeah, the Jets running backs averaged less than 2 yards per carry against the Patriots. And if you rewind it a week before, where the Dolphins were able to use Raheem Mostert to gash through this Patriots defense, there's just not a lot of good, and we knew this. We're not breaking new information. It's also, if you look at any sort of media reports of the Jets looking to other options, so a lot of times that tells you what you need to know, is that the team is not believing in what they have so far, and so they're desperately looking for other options to come in and perhaps give them a better shot. Right. Chris Jones is back in action for the Chiefs. I know he was back in week 2. You talked about with the Jags game. I don't know if he was fully healthy and ready to go. I think he's getting closer to that point. And I think this Chiefs defense hasn't received enough credit so far this year. Like they've actually impressed me so far. I'm not sure what competition they've played at this point, but it's definitely better than what we've seen in years past. And so I don't know. There's going to be some sick people that are going to get in front of the Chiefs if this game gets to 10. And with teaser protection, moving it up through the 7, obviously a popular teaser leg would be to take the Chiefs and get it below the field goal. At this point, obviously, you're not getting that same value. So that's what we're talking about with teaser protection.
Thank you.
But I can guarantee if this game gets to 10, there's going to be somebody that's going to get in front of it. I'm not saying it's me, and I wish you well, but that's probably where we're headed.
I do love some home dogs, but there's a limit to the sickness that I have. Moving to Monday, and we're actually not going to move anywhere. We're going to stay in the same stadium. The Seattle Seahawks visiting the New York Giants. Called New York, but in New Jersey. I'll never understand that. But anyway, we had the Seahawks at a 1-point favorite at one point. Had a look headline potentially, and then they've actually moved to 1.5-point dog at home. The total is 47 now, climbing from 45. Seattle's been all over the place. A really bad loss in week 1 to the Giants, or excuse me, to the Rams. There we go. I was about to say Dodgers. It's long season. Baseball is hopefully wrapping up soon. But Seattle then won in overtime at Detroit. Did I get that right? Okay. And then won this weekend against the Panthers. So they're 2-1. Should be 3-0 based on how they started, but I guess a weird loss to the Rams will do that to you. Giants, on the other hand, had that huge comeback at Arizona. I'm still not a believer in this Giants team. I thought they were fairly competitive with San Francisco on Thursday night, despite having 2 West Coast games back-to-back Sunday to Thursday. That's got to be one of the worst road trips possible. What do we think about the Giants moving to a favorite? And then I guess that's my first concern or question. And then how do you rate the quarterbacks in this matchup? Because ultimately I forget it every year, and then I eventually I back or bet Zach Wilson, and then I realize I got to start with the quarterback when I break these things down.
Yeah, I would think that the market is looking at the Giants as like this is their low point. You just get walloped against 2 of the better teams in the NFC, notwithstanding the Cowboys' loss on Sunday to Arizona. Still 2 of the better built rosters with the Cowboys and 49ers, and they took their lumps. The Arizona game, as we've seen, Arizona is a little bit more feisty. Doesn't mean that they're good, but they've been feisty so far this year.
Very feisty.
So I think that you're looking at, going into this, people are trying to get in front and say, okay, this is the low point on a team that has a decent amount of talent. I think it's probably too early for Saquon to come back. But if you asked about the quarterback, so let's start there. Daniel Jones has not been the same quarterback we saw last year. I'm not sure what's missing with that. I know that we're trying to find the answer there.
He got paid. That's what happened.
It's certainly possible. It's so like you and I always were like, we try to avoid like the narrative type conversations, but that's a very easy one for us to point to. Geno is, I love Geno because of what his career has done. I'm starting to think that last year was also kind of the peak of what it is. Neither of these teams play defense. We know that the Giants are going to blitz outrageously and throw so many guys at Geno, and the blitz is supposed to be unpredictable, but they blitz so much it's predictable that they're going to try to send so many guys. And so that gives me some concern when you have the receiver core that Seattle has, giving those guys man-to-man coverage and being able for them to get past. I'm just laughing because it's so ridiculous what the Giants do on defense. And
then you got to, if you think about coaches and who's calling these defensive blitzes and things of that nature, Daboll is like beloved by everyone. Pete Carroll should have been retired 5 years ago, it feels.
Yeah.
But I guess whoever owns the Seahawks, Paul Allen family, thinks that he's a really good gum chewer or something like that. That worries me on a Monday night type of situation, is having a worse coach. But I do feel like I trust Geno more than I trust Daniel Jones. And that matters to me, especially as an underdog in a stadium that, I mean, the Giants I think, pack that stadium out a lot more than the Jets do. Both from having lived in New York previously. I mean, to me, it's not the empty home field advantage type of spot like you might see in Las Vegas or in Los Angeles for either of those two teams. So I do want to. I mean, to me, it seems 1.5 is a little bit shorter than it should be for playing on the road. But it's a little bit nicer for Seattle. They don't have to have some like noon start time or 10 a.m. for their body clocks. So that is helpful. I like your point about the Seattle wide receiving core. I think they're dangerous, especially against a weaker or blitzing secondary. The move from Seattle being favored to the Giants being favored doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, besides the Giants being at home and having more prep time. Where do you see this number going? Do you think it comes back towards pick 'em, or do you think it climbs towards 3?
I don't have a solid.
Everybody.
Hey, you know what? Sometimes silence it recollects. It gets people
golden. Silence
back interested into what we're talking about here. I bet this line keeps going in the Giants' favor. Okay, because that's the way this NFL market is right now, and I don't have a good reason for why, but I bet you that's where it goes.
All right, I'm holding out for 3. I'm going to go for my as we do a 6-pack here now, the second week of the show, as we've transitioned to this, which I think worked last week. Let us know in the comments. Slide in some DMs, _SCHNITKER or _G Warner, both of us on Twitter, if you got some comments, questions, concerns, or anything like that. I'm going to go with, since I'm 2-1 on the season so far on our best bets, I'll take the T-box, and I will go in the Cincinnati, Tennessee direction, because I can't stop thinking about Tennessee Titans. So I watched probably more of this team than anyone so far this season. This weekend was a disaster. They could not block anyone, which does remind me a fair amount of the Cincinnati Monday Night Football game at the Los Angeles Rams last night. Cincinnati, though, they started a 1.5 point favorite, have climbed to -2.5, despite some questions about Joe Burrow even playing on Monday Night Football. I think they had fallen from -1.5 to pick 'em, but now are back up to 2.5. And Joe Burrow, to me, did not look like himself whatsoever. Couldn't move in the pocket. And that makes me think a defensive-minded head coach who formerly had a lot of success under Bill Belichick will be sending the house and trying to disrupt anything he can between Joe Burrow and the rest of his offensive line, and then trying to get the ball to Ja'Marr Chase. Tennessee is my biggest question, is with their offensive line. Do we think that there's going to be any sort of marked improvement between a really bad offensive line showing, since you're the offensive line trenches guru on this show? Do you expect that sort of thing to change over a week, or do you think that's something that really is going to take a long time to fix? Because I got to say, from what I watched with Myles Garrett, who I don't know that Cincinnati has anybody of that caliber, but they certainly had Hendrickson getting to the quarterback a ton on Monday night.
Yeah, I think that's where you kind of nailed it right there. We have to look at Cleveland's defensive line this year is elevated to nearly the top of the board. And we saw it in week 1 as well with the Titans, with playing the Saints, which also has a really relentless defensive line, getting pressure on Tannehill, handing him one of his worst games of his career. I don't think the Bengals provide that same sort of spark. They're, like you said, Hendrickson is a great all-around player, but what the Browns have assembled here is a collection of parts that are pretty elite behind Myles Garrett, who is the best pass rusher in the league right now, besides Michael Parsons, maybe. So yeah, I don't think that the Bengals will be able to get to Tannehill like the Browns were, but okay, as abysmal as it was, is that enough? Is that enough for you to feel good that the Titans will give their quarterback a chance to throw the ball? And we know that they're going to just pound it into the middle of the line, which they may see more success there as well, compared to a Browns interior defensive line.
Yeah, I think my bigger concerns are about Cincinnati and Joe Burrow, though I know he could throw the ball, and I know that even a non-mobile type of guy last night against Aaron Donald should be able to have the quick checkdowns and things of that nature with the talent he has in his wide receiving core. That I would suspect that is probably going to be an easier way to move the ball than with Ryan Tannehill, who unfortunately was not really Tana Chill on Sunday. And so I got to say, at 2.5, it's probably too low for me right now. If it hits 3, though, that does get me very interested, because I do feel that the Nashville crowd doesn't get a lot of credit, but Tennessee's played really well at home for a lot of years now. And this Cincinnati team really doesn't seem like a 2.5-point favorite based on how they're currently constructed, especially how much they struggled with the Los Angeles Rams, who no one expected to be good last night on Monday night. So now your turn, and Drew, your selection for your last one of the 6-pack.
Well, I think we have to go to the game that probably has the most intrigue of the week.
Okay.
The Miami Dolphins coming off a near NFL record scoring outburst with 70 points against the Denver Broncos. I've heard so much hyperbole about the Dolphins offense, calling it the fastest that's ever been assembled. And I'm not hyperbole. I guess I shouldn't say it like that, because it may well be the fastest offense that's ever been assembled. And going on the road and playing the Buffalo Bills. This game is at, where are we at now? 2.5 in favor of Buffalo.
2.5, opened 3.5 at 59.5 for the total. But I guess when one team scores 70, then you see that total jump up to 53.5. And it looks very juiced right now. We might see a 3 pop in sometime soon in Miami, which does make me feel like a lot of people are going to be trying to take those 3 points.
I would agree with that. I think if you look at it from a numbers perspective, this is probably a little short compared to where we were even, well, we can go back to last season, but even, a couple weeks ago, I don't know if I would be putting the Bills as a 2.5-point favorite at home against Miami. Obviously things have changed. What side should we start with? Which side do you want me to take?
I'm most interested, as always, in the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen, which is probably not what you expected me to say, but I just have not felt he's healthy for a long time. Sure. Until I hear he gets Tommy John surgery. I don't think he is. Well,
then I'll take the other side, because that's super intriguing to me. I think Buffalo, their head coach, Sean McDermott, his DNA is defense. Like the last couple of years, they've been more of an offensive team. This team appears to be playing a defense in probably the identity that he wants. I was impressed with the way that they played against Washington, and I think this is actually a pretty fair matchup with Miami all around. Mike McDaniel is the man. I think he's one of my favorites to watch. I think what he does in the running game is incredible. Putting guys in motion, stacking each side to give his guys the numbers advantage. That's all it is. It's math, and he's brilliant at it. So that side of the ball is where I think this game is going to be won. McDermott is he's always up for the challenge when it comes to defensive minds. I like their pass rush. I think that they can get some pressure on Tua. It's going to be a matter on if they can stop the run, if they can contain what these two running backs have become for the Dolphins.
So last year, first matchup in Miami, Buffalo, 4-point favorite, lost straight up. Then as a 7-point favorite at home late in the season, won, and then had a very close survival type of situation in the wild card round as a 14-point favorite at home.
Yeah.
And barely
remember that obviously that first game in Miami, we're talking about probably 100% humidity, one of the first weeks of the year.
Yes. And then the last one we had Skylar Thompson starting for the Miami Dolphins. So I guess now let's get to the Dolphin side of it all. They're clearly playing pretty well offensively, just dropped 70 on the Broncos, which is a big deal, clearly. They've got 2 receivers that are really hard to stop, and you can't really, most teams don't have 2 star cornerbacks. So you got to put one on Cheetah, Tyreek Hill, and one on Waddle. And there's a reason why there's a lot of waddling going on the end zone from what I've been watching. So my interest is Miami in this one. I recognize that Bills Mafia is fairly serious, but usually it's more throwing people through burning tables than it is, I think, putting a real impact on a team. You probably will see a silent count for a road team in this one, which does matter in terms of getting off the ball and things of that nature. I'm not sure that I'm that afraid of Buffalo's defense, though, at this point. I think this is one of those numbers where I will be like a lot of those fish that are swimming up from Miami, waiting to see if a 3 pops here. I don't know that I have a feel necessarily on the total. I mean, we've seen the Buffalo offense just go off at times. They really made mincemeat out of the Las Vegas Raiders at home a couple of weeks ago, were dominant against the Redskins. Well, Commanders, Washington football team last weekend. And to me, that's completely outshadowed by how many points the Miami Dolphins scored. So it is certainly buying Miami at a high point, or potentially it's paying a lot of money for a large pizza when it was a lot cheaper a few days ago. What do you think about, I guess, Buffalo and kind of being a little bit under the radar, maybe?
Yeah, because I think most people watched week one on Monday Night Football and then kind of threw him away for the rest of it because Josh Allen made some terrible decisions and something changed at halftime where they were winning comfortably 13-0, I think, or 13-3,
Yep.
and then kind of gave that game away. So I think that's most of what people have assumed is that's what Buffalo is. And to me, I've moved them up again in my power ratings compared to Griffin, I have them very high in my own power ratings. I think week one was the outlier of a very long season.
Sure.
And that I still have the same faith, even notwithstanding, the injury concerns and even off the field stuff with Josh Allen. I think that he's in tune. He's good.
Okay. I mean, all you can do after you blow a Monday Night Football while everyone's watching type of game in week one is blow out the next two teams, which is exactly what they've done. So you might be right that there seems to be a little bit of a discount on the home team right there. And let's see if Miami can really keep it going or if they will suffer from being unable to follow upon a 70-point outing. So now it's time for best bets. We're going to go through this. We had a 2-0 week 2, unfortunately an 0-2 week 3. So we enter this week 4 at 3-3, but here we go. We're going to get back on the winning path. I'm going to start with my best bet. It's going to come from probably one of the sexier games out there, if I had to say. I know it's one that you're really interested in, and I think you're going to tell your wife she needs to give you some alone time to really watch this one. For my best bet, I'm going to go with the Chicago Bears at home against the Denver Broncos, 3-point underdog. I'm not a believer in Justin Fields, but I do know that he can at least run the ball. That doesn't seem to be something that Russell Wilson will do anymore. And to me, yes, Denver just gave up 70 points, but I think there's a potential for them to bounce back, but I'm not a believer. I want to pay to see it. So I'll take 3 points in what could potentially be a windy type of environment for Russell Wilson, who's struggled to pass for a long time now. So give me Chicago plus 3 points at home for my best bet for this week 4 episode.
Griffin, it's so perfect that you picked the game with the worst teams in the league. It's like it's 100% our playbook. I couldn't be prouder in this moment.
Thank you.
You taking the Chicago Bears. I'm not that much farther behind you because this game is pretty yucky too. But here's the deal. At this point in the season, you got to rely on some of your evaluations early, but then you also have to adjust to some things that have surprised you in the first couple of weeks. And I am going to go. I actually almost changed it just a couple minutes ago, Griffin, but I've decided to stick with it. And I'm going to go with the Rams. I have an under ticket on the season win total for the Rams, but I'm going to take them a small underdog against the Indianapolis Colts this week. Gardner Minshew is a very good backup quarterback. But there are just some pieces of that Indianapolis Colts team that I can just not get on board with. Meanwhile, the Monday night game was disappointing if you were a Rams fan or a Rams backer. But this team is playing at a higher level than I think most people gave them credit. The way that McVay has found these other pieces of the offense and have just basically kept, as long as you can keep Stafford upright, which was a disaster on Monday night, getting those guys the ball has not been a problem. And I like what they've got with the new running back after they moved on from Cam Akers. I like what they have with Tutu Atwell, and we've talked about Puka Nacua before. They seem like the guys, like this is just the new transition, the new generation of Rams receivers that come up out of nowhere, and Sean McVay makes them look good. Meanwhile, I just don't know where the Colts are. What's their identity at this point? Like, are we just still trying to figure it out? Their defense is bottom of the pack, and I think they're getting a little bit too much credit for a sloppy game and a win against Baltimore.
One thing I do know is I will not be leaving Zach Moss on my bench in fantasy again for another 20+ outing, because I'm staring at an 0-3. I'm not sure I've ever been 0-3 in fantasy before in my most important league. And so
is that our league?
What?
Is that our league? Is
that
your most important?
Nope. I'm 1-2 in that one. Though should have been in last place if things went as according to plan last week. So maybe it hasn't been a good fantasy start to the season, but that's why We got a long way to go. Thankfully, they added an extra week. They added an extra week, so I got more chances to get back to 500. So to summarize for this week 4 episode of Betting the Pitch NFL edition, Andrew Schnicker, A_SCHNITKER on Twitter. He has taken the Los Angeles Rams, a 1-point underdog on the road at Indianapolis. And for my best bet, the real _G Warner on Twitter, easy for me to say, I've gone with the Chicago Bears +3 at home against the Denver Broncos. So join us next week. And next Tuesday night, we'll try to give you some ideas on where we expect lines to move. Potentially give you a maybe a better Sunday night, Monday night type of outing or potential experience, considering these games look like they might be horrible. But stick with us. Thank you if you're on YouTube, please subscribe. If you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please leave a 5-star review. It'd be huge to get us up the search rankings. We really appreciate the amount of adoption so far that's come through. And tell your friends, tell your family members, listen to it at dinner if you'd like to, if you must. Get us some hits, and we will talk to you all next Tuesday night. If I could shut this off, how do I do that? 1 second.